On a freezing winter night, criminals thought they could hurt the helpless and walk away untouched. They were wrong. When a wounded mother dog crawled through the snow, she didn't find pity. She found justice. And the man who answered her silent plea was a former Navy SEAL who no longer hunted enemies. Until evil crossed his path. What happened next was not revenge, it was consequence. It was the kind of justice that arrives quietly, strikes precisely, and leaves no doubt behind. If you believe actions have consequences, share this story, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories where justice, redemption, and faith still matters. Footprints in the snow. The wind off Lake Superior cut through Duluth like a blade, dragging snow sideways across the empty streets. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of his porch, a tall, broad-shouldered man wrapped in a navy winter coat that had seen better years. At 38, his face was hard and angular, marked by a thin scar near his right eyebrow, and a beard kept short, more out of habit than style. His hair was dark brown, trimmed close, already touched with gray at the temples. His eyes were the kind that missed very little, calm on the surface, distant beneath. War had taught him how to watch without reacting. Beside him sat Ranger. The German Shepherd was 6 years old, black and tan, large even for his breed. His posture was perfectly still, ears forward, amber eyes locked on the darkness beyond the yard. A black harness rested across his chest, the silver lettering clear even in the storm. Service dog, do not pet. Ranger did not bark. He never barked unless it mattered. Ethan followed the dog's gaze and saw them. Footprints. They were scattered and uneven, pressed deep into fresh snow that should have been untouched. Smaller than a man's boots, too large to belong to a fox. Streaked with dark stains that could only be blood. Ethan's chest tightened. Since leaving the Navy SEALs, he had learned to ignore instincts most men would call paranoia. But some instincts were earned the hard way. This was one of them. Ranger rose slowly, muscles tight beneath his thick coat. His breath fogged the air. He glanced at Ethan once, a silent question. "All right," Ethan said quietly. "Let's see." They moved off the porch and into the storm. Snow creaked under their boots and paws. The tracks led away from the cabin, toward the old harbor district where warehouses leaned against each other like drunk men who had given up. Half a mile in, they found her. The German Shepherd female lay half buried near a collapsed fence, ribs visible beneath her matted fur. Her coat was the same black and tan as Ranger's, but dulled by frost and dirt. Her belly was swollen and raw from nursing. One paw twitched weakly. She lifted her head when Ethan knelt, eyes clouded with pain but sharp with purpose. She did not growl. She did not try to flee. She struggled to stand, failed, then turned her head toward the warehouses and let out a low, broken sound that barely carried through the wind. Ranger stepped forward, body rigid, not aggressive, alert. Ethan understood. She was not asking to be saved. She was asking him to follow. A silent plea. Ethan wrapped the dog in his spare thermal blanket, just enough to keep her alive, not enough to slow her. She forced herself up and staggered forward, limping toward the harbor. Ethan stayed close, one hand ready, the other resting near the concealed pistol under his coat. Ranger walked ahead, scanning every shadow, every doorway, every broken window. The harbor district was dead at night. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletons. Snow collected in drifts between abandoned buildings, but Ethan knew better than to believe it was empty. They reached Warehouse 17. Light leaked from beneath a metal door. Muffled voices echoed inside. Laughter. The female dog collapsed near the entrance, breath shallow now. Ethan crouched beside her, his jaw tightening. Inside, the sounds were unmistakable. The metallic clank of cages. The yelp of frightened animals. Dogfighting. Ranger's body lowered, tail still, eyes burning. Ethan's memories surfaced without warning. A failed extraction in Helmand Province. Dogs used as alarms. Men who laughed, while others suffered. He exhaled slowly. This was not a battlefield, but the rules were the same. Through a crack in the door, he saw them. 3 men, mid-30s to mid-40s, thick jackets, knuckles scarred, faces flushed from alcohol and cruelty. One was tall and heavy-set, shaved head gleaming under fluorescent lights. Another was lean, with a crooked nose and a patchy beard. The third sat on a crate, counting cash. Inside the cages were puppies, German shepherds, some barely breathing. Ethan felt the familiar cold settle over him. He did not rush in. He waited. Ranger's presence beside him was a promise. Silent, controlled. deadly if needed. Ethan made the call. When the door finally opened, it was not with shouting or gunfire. It was with precision. Men who thought they owned the night. The metal door creaked open with a sound that cut through the storm. Cold air rushed inside the warehouse, scattering the stale smell of sweat, blood, and cheap liquor. For a brief second, the men inside were blinded by the white glare of snow reflecting the floodlights outside. Then they saw the dog. Ranger stood in the doorway like a carved statue, tall and immovable. Snow clung to his thick black and tan coat, melting slowly against his body heat. His ears were upright, his jaw relaxed but ready, amber eyes fixed on the three men before him. The black harness across his chest caught the light, the silver letters unmistakable. Behind him stood Ethan Cole. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush forward. He simply filled the doorway with quiet authority. His shoulders were squared, his posture loose but balanced, the way it had been drilled into him years ago on windswept training grounds and hostile foreign soil. His face was unreadable, eyes steady, breath slow. The men stared. The first was named Travis Miller, though Ethan would not learn that until later. Miller was tall and heavy-set, close to 300 pounds, with a shaved head and thick neck. His hands were scarred and swollen, the knuckles flattened from years of fighting. He had the careless confidence of a man who had rarely been challenged. The second, Cole Jensen, was leaner, wiry, with a crooked nose that had been broken more than once, patchy brown beard, restless eyes that flicked from Ranger to Ethan and back again. He was the type who relied on speed and cruelty rather than strength. The third man, Marcus Reed, sat on a wooden crate near the cages. He was shorter, mid-40s, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses that slid down his nose as his hands trembled over a stack of cash. He was not a fighter. He was the organizer. Miller scoffed first. "What the hell is this?" he said, voice thick with alcohol. "You lost, man?" Ranger took one step forward, not fast, not aggressive, just enough. The sound of claws against concrete echoed through the warehouse. The cages behind the men rattled as frightened puppies shifted inside, sensing danger but not understanding its source. Ethan's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Step away from the cages." Miller laughed again, louder this time, forcing bravado into the sound. "You and your dog think you scare us?" Ranger's gaze never left Miller's face. Ethan knew men like this, men who mistook silence for weakness, men who believed violence only counted if it was loud. Miller reached into his jacket. Ethan moved. Years of training collapsed into a single, efficient motion. He closed the distance before Miller's hand cleared the fabric. His forearm struck Miller's throat with surgical precision, cutting off air and sound. The man dropped to his knees, gasping, hands clawing at his neck. Jensen lunged, swinging a metal pipe. Ranger intercepted him. The dog exploded into motion, slamming his body into Jensen's midsection with controlled force. Jensen crashed into the wall, the pipe clattering across the floor. Ranger pinned him there, paws planted, teeth bared inches from Jensen's face. He did not bite. He did not growl. He waited. Reed fumbled for the handgun tucked into his waistband. His fingers were clumsy, slick with sweat. Ethan was already there. He twisted Reed's wrist sharply, the sound of bones snapping loud in the enclosed space. Reed screamed and collapsed, clutching his arm, the gun skidding across the concrete. The entire confrontation lasted less than half a minute. When it was over, the three men lay scattered on the floor, groaning and terrified. Blood pooled beneath Miller's chin. Jensen whimpered, pinned by the sheer presence of a dog that did not need to prove anything. Reed rocked back and forth, shock etched across his pale face. Ethan stood in the center of the warehouse, breathing steady. He looked past them to the cages. Inside were the puppies, German shepherds, weeks old, some pressed together for warmth. Others lay still, eyes dull, bodies too small and weak to fight the cold. The sight tightened something in Ethan's chest that he had thought long buried. He knelt and began tying the men's hands with zip restraints from his coat pocket. "You chose this," he said quietly. "Now you live with it." Ranger stepped back from Jensen and positioned himself between the men and the cages, standing guard. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. Justice without noise. Dawn arrived pale and cold. State troopers moved through the forest with professional precision, their breath visible in the air. The smugglers were arrested less than an hour later, their trucks found loaded with illegal weapons, hidden beneath tarps and spare tires. Mark Reynolds was taken to the hospital in Duluth. By the time his statement was recorded, he was alert, his voice firm. He described the ambush, the river, the men who believed the cold would finish their work for them. News traveled fast in a small winter town. People spoke in lowered voices at diners and gas stations. They talked about the veteran in the woods, about the German shepherd who never barked. Ethan avoided town. He always had. But Mark returned a week later, walking carefully but upright, a bandage still visible at his temple. They sat at the small wooden table in the cabin, steam rising from their mugs. "I spent 10 years believing the badge was enough," Mark said, "believing the system would protect itself." Ethan listened without interruption. "When they tied me up," Mark continued, "they weren't afraid. They thought they were untouchable." Ranger lay at Ethan's feet, eyes half closed, listening. "They were wrong," Mark said. Ethan nodded once. "Power doesn't need to announce itself," he said. "It just needs to be ready." Mark looked at Ranger. "That dog," he said quietly. "They feared him more than any weapon." Ethan followed his gaze. "They sensed restraint," he said. "That's what scares dangerous people most." Mark stood to leave. Before he reached the door, he turned back. "You ever miss it?" he asked. "The uniform, the purpose." Ethan considered the question carefully. "No," he said. "I kept the purpose. I just lost the uniform." Winter holds. Hope remains. The cabin was warm. Firelight flickered across wooden walls worn smooth by time and solitude. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, life stirred softly. The female shepherd lay on a thick blanket near the hearth, her breathing slow and even. Her coat had been cleaned, wounds treated. Beside her, the puppies slept in a loose pile, small chests rising and falling in rhythm. Ranger lay near the door, as always. His body was relaxed now, but his awareness never faded. He lifted his head at every sound, every shift of air, then settled again. Ethan sat in a chair by the fire, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands. He watched the dogs and felt something unfamiliar, peace. Not the kind that erased memory or pain, the kind that came from doing what needed to be done and stopping when it was finished. He thought of the men in the warehouse, of the choices they had made, of the line they had crossed believing no one would stop them. He had not crossed that line himself. That mattered. Outside, Duluth slept beneath snow and silence. Somewhere in the city, men whispered warnings. Somewhere else, puppies lived because someone had listened, when a creature without words had asked for help. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. Winter would pass, but some lessons would remain. And in the quiet, justice stood watch. Sometimes miracles do not come as thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, in the shape of help that comes at the last possible moment. That night in the snow, no voice from heaven spoke, but mercy still moved. A broken creature found the right door. A wounded man chose to act instead of turning away. And evil, for once, did not get the final word. Many people believe miracles must be grand. But in everyday life, miracles often look like courage, like restraint when anger would be easier, like choosing to protect instead of ignore, like standing up for those who cannot speak. If this story touched you, maybe it is because you have seen moments like this in your own life. Small acts that changed everything. Help that arrived just in time. A quiet strength you did not know you had. May God bless you and your family. May He protect those who walk in the cold and the dark. And may He remind us that faith is not only something we feel, but something we live. If this story moved your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story made you feel. And subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories of faith, justice, and quiet miracles. God bless you.